Your teams are everything, right? Great CEOs. I don't claim to be a great CEO, but even the great CEOs, the ones that are brilliant, they're such a small piece of the business's success. They're the ones that end up on the cover of magazines, I guess, but it's really about the team, right? Your team is critical to bring the different areas of expertise that you need to build out the different pieces of the business, and to be able to see things that as the CEO that you just don't have visibility into, or you're spending your time on other pieces of the business and you have to let those individuals go and own their departments, right? The things that they are responsible for. I can't really emphasize enough how important the team is.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is John Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we talk about empowerment culture. When you have a culture where people are empowered, you are able to trust them, you're able to hold them accountable, and they're able to innovate without you standing over them. And that really is what we want, is a culture in our fast growth companies. Today's special guest is the Chairman, Chief Strategic Officer of Vouched. Vouched is an AI identity platform. They really help like banks and other financial institutions make sure that we're talking to the same people. There's a lot more use cases for that. But John Baird and I talk about what it really means to have empowerment as a big part of our culture. And that empowerment culture is something that he has staked his success on, and the performance of his company on. They were number 141 on the Inc. list. Vouched is an incredible culture around it, but they didn't get there alone. They had to create this empowerment culture. So we unpack that today for you. My name is John Hammett. I'm an executive coach. We do leadership development. We really work with mostly fast growth companies, but we also work with companies that have a big opportunity on the horizon. When you have this huge opportunity, you want to make sure that you are aligned, you are prepared to lead through this, and you want to address all the cracks in the foundation of your own leadership. You want to make sure you're evolving. And that's the core of the work that me and my team do to help you become the leader that people want to follow and help you really seize the opportunity in front of you. Now, if you're curious about the work we do, I offer a chance to sit down and talk about your own company, the strategy, the leadership, the culture, and we really zero in on what's getting in the way of the predictable growth that you want, or this opportunity that you have on the horizon. Now, I'll give this away for free because I find that a lot of my best customers come from these conversations. You don't have to work with me. I'm happy to give you everything you can, and you can soak it up and you can use me and wring me out to dry. I say that with a smile, but I really do want to help you and your company grow and create the kind of success. I've had a tremendous track record. I primarily work with fast growth companies, and I've worked with more Inc. 5000 level companies in leadership development than anyone in the world. Hundreds and hundreds of people at this point. And so if I can help you just in a simple conversation, I'm happy to do that. Now, if you do want us to work with you, all you have to do is say so, and we'll explore that and what it looks like. But initially, we'll just figure out what's getting in the way, create a plan for you, prioritize these things, and really help you be real clear about how you're going to move forward. If you want to do that, just go to Gene@GeneHammett.com. I promise not to sell you. I know that sounds odd. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to serve and create relationships. And if you're curious about that, then let's have that conversation. Just send me an email, Gene@GeneHammett.com. Now, here's to the empowerment culture conversation and interview with John Baird. John, how are you?
Hey, Gene, I'm great. It's good to see you.
I'm excited to have this conversation. We're going to have fun, talk about an empowerment culture. Before we dive into that, I'd love for you to tell us about your company, Vouched.
Sure. So at Vouch, we develop artificial intelligence for identity verification. And we really do this we do it for a lot of banks. We work with well over 100 banks across the country. We work with hospital, healthcare. We also do quite a bit of work within automotive, real estate. It's really anywhere that to be able to do your business, either for regulatory purposes or part of your security, you need to deeply understand the identity of the consumer that you're transacting with. And so Vouch slots in. We use artificial intelligence to do a deep verification of that individual. It takes a couple seconds for that person to get this done. And then all the data goes back over to our customers, the business, so they can safely transact with that person.
And I saw you have a background at Blue Nile, and this was hatched from selling expensive diamonds to people?
Yeah, in a lot of ways it was. And I had the great honor to work for a gentleman by the name of Mark Vadon. And he's brilliant. And I hesitate to say this, but 20 plus years ago now, we were selling diamonds online at a time when very few people were buying anything online, right? The e-commerce was still quite new. Very few people had high-speed internets back then. And our customers would spend on average $6,000, often for a diamond engagement ring. And we had the difficulty of understanding, is this person real or is this fraudulent? And there weren't great there wasn't great fraud software out there at the time. So we had a number of operationally, manually intensive processes to be able to understand who this person was. And it wasn't a great customer experience all the time. And we lost certain customers because of it. Most of our customers were thrilled, but every once in a while they'd hit a snag. And so the seeds of what would become Vouched were actually sown almost 25 years ago now. And Vouch came about 6 years ago.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. You made incredible success over the last 3 years to make the Inc. list at 141. Over a 2,000% growth rate in 3 years is impressive. And you wouldn't be able to do this alone. Like, you have a team behind you. So what do you think really helps you and the team create this kind of success?
I mean, I think your teams are everything, right? Great CEOs. I don't claim to be a great CEO, but even the great CEOs, the ones that are brilliant, they're such a small piece of the business's success. They're the ones that end up on the cover of magazines, I guess, but it's really about the team, right? Your team is critical to bring the different areas of expertise that you need to build out the different pieces of the business, and to be able to see things that as the CEO that you just don't have visibility into, or you're spending your time on other pieces of the business and you have to let those individuals go and own their departments, right? The things that they are responsible for. I can't really emphasize enough how important the team is.
Well, we hear it a lot here because we focus on leadership and culture. One area where we did some research on Vouched is an empowerment culture. Before we go any further, what is an empowerment culture to you?
Well, I think in a startup, it's everything, right? Startups are working really at the bleeding edge of what's possible. Sometimes they're even, beyond the edge of what's possible. And to be able to make the business successful, there's so many unknowns. And because there's no track record, right? It's not like, oh, we have a decade or 2 decades of history. We can go back and look at, how this worked and how do we apply it. There are no hard and fast rules here. And so it begins with empowerment for those individuals. But I think even more than providing the empowerment, you have to go find individuals who are okay being empowered. And not everybody is. In fact, you and I were talking about before we started taping, you were telling me a quote, I think, from Jim Carrey, and I'm not going to get it perfectly correct, but you basically said that he said he doesn't view life as being done to him, but that he is out there doing things to life. He's taking control of the situation. And it's a rare individual who can operate with that sort of mindset. And these people are massively driven. And I think what's also true is they chafe at artificial constraints. And I really want to emphasize the word artificial constraints, because I think there's a tremendous number of artificial constraints that we create in our lives. Oh, I can't do this and I can't do that. Nobody told me that I could go out and, do this thing. Nobody gave me permission. And the right individuals, when you empower them, they just go, right? They just go and they get things done, and they don't wait for you to tell them what to do. In fact, they are doing things and they're thinking about things, quite frankly, in a very entrepreneurial way, and solving problems that the business as a whole didn't even know they existed, that existed. And so it's key to find those people that are hungry for that empowerment.
I want to help with the quote that John was talking about, and it's the Jim Carrey quote. And I saw this in a commencement speech, and I'm kind of paraphrasing from memory, but he said this: I don't know if it is true, but I have decided it is for me, that life happens for me, not to me. That's my favorite quote in the world because I've been through some ups and downs. And if I thought that life was happening to me, then I would be a victim to everything around me. And I would be waiting for that other person. I'd have no control or agency in my life. And that's just not who I am. I believe that life happens for me. So I go through tough times, whether they be, missed goals or missed KPIs, or even I lost over $3 million in one of my previous businesses and it put me into bankruptcy. And I still refuse to blame the other person. I trusted him too much. I take ownership of that. And it happened for me, not to me. Now, that's the exact quote, or at least my version of it. And hopefully it'll help you be the leader that you want to be. Back to John. I have done a lot of these interviews, and a common theme comes up quite often is, having people that take ownership of goals, ownership of their work, ownership of even problems that come up so that they can overcome them. And you just said something that kind of in alignment with that, but thinking like an entrepreneur. And that's what you're looking for when you're hiring these talented people. I think a lot of CEOs would be worried about that because they think, oh, well, I'm just going to hire someone who just wants to start their own business. But I know that's not the case. From your perspective on getting people that think like entrepreneurs, are they out there to start their own business? Or are they out there to create something special inside the opportunity that you gave them to work with you?
I mean, there's so many variables, right? I do think that it is probably true that when you hire the right people for your team, there's a decent chance that in a few years, they're going to go out and start their own thing. I think that's absolutely okay. I mean, everybody talks about the PayPal mafia, right? And all of the businesses that have come out of that, I mean, I can't even count the number of, billion-dollar plus businesses that have been produced right out of the team that built PayPal. So in a lot of ways, sure, those are the people that you want. I do also think that it's absolutely true that the people that you hire today, right, who are right at this moment in the business may not be right for the business in the future. And that's absolutely okay. So you have to find people that are stage appropriate for the business at that moment.
Stage appropriate is something I think a lot of people struggle with. I had a recent client who, when I started working with them, they were around 5 million in revenue, and now they're close to 30 million. And he had to make a complete change of the entire executive team, almost. Not everyone, but a good number, more than 50%. And he struggled with it for quite a while. Sounds like you've probably been through similar things where people are, they spend a good time with you, 2 years, 3 years, maybe longer. And then it's time for them to move on. And it's just a different role that's needed, or maybe there's more strategic or more data that's thrown at them, or more AI. And then we have to find a new person for that role. So how did you struggle with that idea?
I think the idea is absolutely, I don't struggle with that idea. I think, one of our values is to hire fast and fire fast. And where I have struggled is probably not holding up the second part of that statement well enough, where you're giving individuals another chance to be successful, and yet another chance when very quickly, I think certainly within the first 8 weeks, whether or not an individual is going to be the one who can deliver. And it goes back to this mindset that we are talking about. Empowered individuals, they hit the ground running before their first day, right? And what's interesting is they almost never come to you with asking for help, right? It's not to say that we don't help one another, but they come to you when there are really gnarly problems, and they bring you in as a partner because they've already done a tremendous amount of work on this, and they need your perspective to go that last mile. And so those empowered individuals, the individuals who want to be empowered, they're working on these things on their own, right? It's not just driving towards an objective. I think in a lot of ways what they do is they go in and they almost make the objective bigger, if you will. They're like, oh, let's go hit 5 million in sales. You mentioned 5 million a moment ago. And they're starting to think, well, what can I do right this weekend to get us to 7 million in sales? And those are the individuals that you want. And they're extremely rare. They're extremely hard to find. And I think one of the mistakes that I made early on is I would look at a resume, right? And the resume would be why we would hire this individual. They have all these accolades and awards, and they've worked at all the right places. And over time, that shifted dramatically, where it's very much about the psychology of that individual and really trying to get into their head to see if they are the one that's going to be able to bring that, it's not just drive, right? It is a specific way of thinking where they are the ones who are going to go out and create success.
Now, John just said something that I like the phrase hire fast and fire fast. But one thing that I want to make sure that every leader does is that when they realize someone's not working out, they be willing to have a tough conversation. I've got a sign right behind me. I've got a book right in front of me, How to Have Tough Conversations. Be willing to engage in the tough conversations early and often. When you do it well, you're letting people know that that behavior is not acceptable or their performance is not working out the way you want them to. And you give them a chance to rise up. Now, if they don't lean in, they don't want to change, they don't want to evolve, they don't want to address this, then you have a choice to make. You can let that persist, you can tolerate it, or you can let them go to some place where they're supposed to be. Now, it's up to you, but I believe that you should certainly hire people that are willing to take that kind of feedback. You are willing to give them the feedback as a leader. And that tough conversation is a cornerstone to the success of you being the leader and getting the results you want to. Back to John. I love where we're going with this. We've been talking about empowerment culture with you. And I had a question because I know I did some research on the company. You are not the CEO of this company. You are the chief strategy officer. You're still the chairman. I'm sure that you have, financial stake still in play. But when and why did you make the decision to hire a CEO?
Yeah, it was very much what we were talking about, right? I believe that there's a stage for everyone to be successful. And one of the things I know about myself is I'm very much that early stage thinker in the business. And I'm very much a cowboy about doing things. And so about a year ago, I really started thinking, okay, like I've brought the business to here and we've had a tremendous success so far. You talked about that earlier on the Inc. 5000. And, but I knew I needed somebody else, right? Like I knew that I had like my strengths no longer applied to where the business is today. So I brought on a gentleman, Peter Horridon. Peter was the CTO of a very large company called Avalara for a number of years, a very successful multi-billion-dollar company. He went on, created his own startup, scaled that startup up, exited that startup. He's an engineer by training. I am not an engineer. We are an AI company first. And I'm looking at Peter going, this guy is ticking every single box. He has strengths that I don't have. And for me, it's always been about make the company successful for my investors, for my customers, for my employees. It's about everybody winning. It's not about me or my ego. And Peter's strengths take us to that next level. And so it's very much about this mindset of, finding the right person for the right stage of the business, plug them in, and then get to that next level.
I'm imagining a very collaborative relationship, but there's got to be some point in time where you guys disagree. And you have this empowerment culture. He's the CEO. How have you guys decided to handle that?
Yeah. I think you have to give an individual the space, empowerment culture, right, to go out and truly understand, to take control on their own. And then where there are the really big problems, right, the big strategic pieces that take the business to the next level, that's where you really dive in together. And then on this topic of disagreement, and you referenced your book earlier, Tough, right? And I haven't read it yet, but you're going to send me a copy. But what the Cliff's Notes that you mentioned, it's about having those hard conversations. And I think part of empowerment is to know that we are going to disagree. In fact, I'm probably very different in this respect. I love disagreement. I came from a family that we would debate whatever the topics of the day were, and voices would get raised, and we would shout each other down, and we'd have these fights over the dinner table or on, family vacations when you're stuck in the car for 8 hours at a time. And we would all do it nobody would ever get angry about it because we wanted to hear the other person's point of view and get to a better answer, right, than an individual would have on their own, living in their own bubble. This now seems very topical given the elections a couple weeks ago. So, I love the disagreement because I believe out of that tension comes something much better than you could have gotten to on your own. But it does require a tremendous amount of trust. And I would say, going back to the individual who wants to be empowered, they are not, they have a certain amount of bravery themselves. So they are not cowed by disagreement. They actually want to get in there and engage in the disagreement. And when you walk out of the room with that person, whatever decision was made, you want to support that person 100. You want to support the decision 100%. And if it doesn't work, the worst thing you can possibly do is go back later and say, see, I told you so. We're all going to make mistakes. We're never going to be right 100% of the time. So out of the disagreement, right, should come a better answer. And then you support each other in that answer, no matter if it turns out to be right or wrong.
Well, you've got a pretty good sense of what's in the book. Although I will share that there's some tactics in there that will probably help even our listeners and you even get better at this. As we wrap up today's conversation, we've been talking about empowerment culture. Is there anything or any element of that we have not touched on that you feel like is pertinent to others that might be listening in about creating an empowerment culture in their company?
I think the biggest thing is when you see people hiding things, when they don't want to engage with what the problem is, that is a very clear sign that they don't fit within the culture, because mistakes are inherent within startups, great startups, right? And you and I talked about this too before we started recording. And if an individual can't publicly engage with those mistakes and figure out, do a retro on it, right? Like, well, how could we have done this differently? Where did we screw up? There's no judgment in that, right? The mistakes are fine. But you got to go back and say, okay, how can we do better next time? What can we learn from this? If you have an individual who wants to hide that, then they're absolutely the wrong person for the culture. And I would say that out of that desire to hide things, that's really where the toxicity starts to come from, because then you start to have those very behind the scenes, off the record political conversations that do not build trust within an organization. Let's put it all out on the table. Let's talk about it. Nobody's in trouble here. And then let's make it better for the next time.
Well, that's a good place to wrap up today. John, thank you for being here, sharing your wisdom with us on Growth Think Tank.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Had a great time.
Wow. Another great interview here on the podcast. I love empowerment culture, and I love the idea of leaders empowering others. It's such an important piece. I have this 7-dial framework. Empowerment is one of the dials. And so you have to get that right if you want to have the kind of company that performs at the level that is possible, and for you to have a place where you are surrounded by people that are pushing things forward and you're not pulling them all the time. So if you have that empowerment culture, then hopefully today you've got some more insight and layer on top of it. If you don't have it yet, then reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you about what's going on and create more of that inside your own company and culture. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead courage. We'll see you next time.